In this video, we'll be having a look at the tenancy transactions functions and the property transactions functions of Shintaro. We'll start with tenancy transactions functions. From the home screen, if we go into Finance and into Tenancy Transactions Functions, we have three options in this list here. The first option is Manage Tenancy Transactions. If we click on this, we see a search screen just like other search screens in Shintaro, but it has all of the transactions from all of the tenancies. You can use this screen to generate reports and also to investigate things. For example, we can see all of the rent that was paid last month. To do this, we click on the black arrow in Transaction Type and select Rent Payment. And this will show all rent payments. Then we could use a date filter to show all of the rent payments in the last month. So we click on the black arrow in the date column, go down to Date Filters, and then click on Last Month. So this shows us all of the rent that we collected in the last month, and the total amount that we received in rent for the last month was $43,406. If we wanted to, we could filter this list further for a particular tenancy or program, or however you want to filter this screen. Let's say we want to look at all of the rent payments from our group housing program. We can right-click on any entry with group housing and select Equals Group Housing. Now we see that we've received a total of $24,362 for our rent payments in the last month for the group housing program. We can now click Export and view this data in an Excel spreadsheet. So this is one way to get an Excel spreadsheet of tenancy transaction information. There are exports available in the Exports function of Shintaro, but this is another way to manipulate or investigate data without having to create an export from the Export function. Now we'll clear the current filters on the Program field and the Date field, and we will use a different date filter. This time we'll click on the black arrow in the Date column, go down to Date Filters, and we will select Between. Now we select the dates that we want to see the rent payments for, and we will select the oldest date as the 1st of the 1st, 2015, and the newest as the 30th of the 6th, 2015, which will show all rent payments that we have received for the first 6 months of the year. We could then add non-rent payments by clicking the black funnel icon in the Transaction Type column and selecting Furniture Payment, Garden Payment, and Utilities Payment from this list. Let's clear that filter by clicking Show All at the top here. Now let's say that we want to view all of the rent charges and payments for one of our programs, and we want to view these transactions for the joint venture program for this year. We can first select the transaction type that we want to view, so we click the black arrow in Transaction Type, deselect All, and select both rent charges and payments. Then, in the Date column, we'll go down to Date Filters and select This Year. Now when we go to the Program column, we can click on any entry with joint venture in the Program field and select Equals Joint Venture. Now we can click Export to export the data to Excel and see all of the transactions for this year for both rent charges and rent payments in our joint venture program. We could also filter this list to see the rent transactions for a particular property. Again, we click Show All to take us back to the default view. So we select both rent charges and rent payments from the transaction type column. And we want to look at all of the transactions that occurred in the last month for the property at Danforth 34. We then filter the date to show the last month. And now we can filter by property name. This time we'll use the text filter Contains. So we right-click on any entry in the property column, go down to Text Filters, and select Contains. Here we can type DAN and click OK. And now our screen is filtered to show all of the rent charges and payments that occurred last month for the property at Danforth 34. So we can use this screen to filter and sort on all of these columns for all transactions for all tenancy ledgers, not just individual tenancy ledgers, to get totals and exports directly from this screen. Another thing we can do on this screen is we can print receipts. If we want to send receipts to the tenants at Danforth 34, we will filter the transaction type to only show rent payments by clicking on any entry with rent payment and selecting Equals Rent Payment, and then select all tenants by clicking the Select All function at the top here. Then, when we're ready, we click Word Merge Receipt. A Microsoft Word document opens up with the receipts we can now print. If we want to send an invoice to the tenants for charges, we will filter the transaction type for rent charges, select all tenants, and click on Word Merge Invoice. Again, Microsoft Word will open up to show all of the invoices that we will now print and send to our tenants. Now, let's go back to the Tenancy Transactions menu and we'll have a look at Tenancy Transactions Bulk Data Entry. If you have lots of transactions to enter into tenancy records like water charges, you could do it by going into the tenancy and entering a transaction manually, but if you want to do this in bulk, we can do this via the Tenancy Transactions Bulk Data Entry screen. When we click on this, we see this screen. So we're going to charge our tenants at the property named Pretty Vacant with their water charges. So we type the name of the tenant in here and we'll start with Paul Cook. Then we tab over to the transaction type and begin to type water, and water charge comes up. Then we tab over to the date, and this will be today's date, the 11th of the 8th, 2015. And we will put the amount of $100 in here. There is no GST as there's no GST on water, but if there was GST for something like tenant damage, we would put the GST amount in here. In the comments, we can put water usage. When we click Tab on the keyboard, it will take us to the next line to enter another name. So then we put Glenn Matlock and tab to transaction type. There's a shortcut on your keyboard if you want to have the same entry in the transaction type field here as the above entry by holding down Control and pressing the apostrophe key. So we tab over to the date and we do the same. Hold down Control and press apostrophe. The amount is the same, $100, so we hold down Control and press apostrophe. And again with comments, we hold down Control and press apostrophe. This shortcut is going to save you a lot of time when entering charges such as water charges, where the transaction type and description will be the same for all tenants. Now let's tab to the tenancy field again, and we enter Sid Vicious. We tab over to transaction type and hold down Control and apostrophe for the transaction type and date fields. But Sid only used $50 of water, so we put 50 in the amount. And then in the comments, we hold down Control and press apostrophe again. Then we'll do the same for Paul Hewson and Jack White. So once we've entered all of our transactions and we're happy with them, we can click on the Process Transactions button up here, and this will enter these transactions onto the tenancies. Before we do this, we can go out of this screen and back in, and the transactions are still there. If you come into this screen and there are transactions in here that you don't want, you will click on the Delete All button at the top here, and this will clear the screen for you. If you do want to process the transactions, click on Process Transactions, and we get a warning. This will process all data entry records. Do you want to continue? And we will click Yes. So this has now created 5 tenancy transactions. If we go and have a look at Jack White's tenancy, we can see the water charge that we entered in here. So this is the quick way of entering tenancy transactions for multiple tenancies. The last screen that we're going to look at in the Tenancy Transactions function is the Tenancy Transactions Bulk Add screen. If we go back to the home screen and into Finance and Tenancy Transactions Functions, the last option in this list here is the Tenancy Transactions Bulk Add screen. This screen is used if you want to bulk charge tenancies for the same amount. This screen is only used when transactions are the same for the same amounts. So first we'll filter our list to show the tenancies within the property at Postcard Place. We click on the black funnel icon in Property Name, go down to Text Filters, and click on Begins With. Then we will put in POST and OK, and we have filtered our list to show the 4 tenants at Postcard Place. Now we want to charge each of these tenants with a home care charge. We select all tenants by clicking the Select All button, and then we click Add Transaction. The transaction type will be a home care charge. The date will be today, and the amount will be $10. In the description, we can type Home Care Garden Charge. When we click Add, we can see those 4 transactions have been generated. Now when we go into one of our tenancies at Postcard Place, we can see that today a home care garden charge was created for the amount of $10. So we use the bulk data entry screen for varying amounts and the bulk add screen for transactions that are the same amounts. Now we'll have a brief look at the property transactions functions of Shintaro. To get to the property transactions functions from the home screen, we go into Finance and Property Transactions Functions. Here we see a number of options, and the first one in this list is the Manage Property Transactions screen. When we click on this, we see all of the property transactions. In our property record, we have a property ledger. So this screen will show all of the transactions from the property ledgers. This has nothing to do with tenancies or tenancy transactions. This screen will only show us the property transactions. If we go back to the previous menu, we see the Property Transaction Bulk Data Entry screen. And in this screen, we can enter in property transactions such as management fees or council rates or anything like this. If we go back to the previous menu again, we have the Property Transaction Bulk Add screen also. And this is where we can add transactions to properties in bulk, rather than tenancies like we saw just before. If we go back to the previous menu, we also have the Generate Charges screen and the Property Charge Batch Maintenance screen. These functions will be covered in a future e-learning video.